Sidebar is the official podcast of the Napa County District Attorney's Office. Hello everyone, this is Carlos Villatoro with the Sidebar Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have three special guests. This is the first time for the Sidebar Podcast, and that's because April is a busy month for us over at the Napa County District Attorney's Office. Not only is it Child Abuse Prevention Month, it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month as well. And today we are talking to three individuals within the Napa County District Attorney's Office who are basically on the front lines of this issue. Is that correct? Today with me, we have Deputy District Attorney Kristen Orlando.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Forensic Interviewer Jessica Solano. Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
Good. And we have DA Investigator Joe Perry.
Good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Thank you very much for joining us today. So I think I want to start off by you guys explaining to our audience, the Sidebar Podcast audience. And by the way, if you don't subscribe to our channel, please do so now. Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate that. Tell us about your roles within the Napa County District Attorney's Office. I'll start with Kristen here.
Sure. So I am a deputy DA. I am on our sexual assault unit, which means we handle adult sexual assault, child physical, and child sexual assault cases, as well as sex offender registration cases. And I handle those cases from the minute they get brought over to our office through the entire court process up until trial and sentencing, and sometimes even when they come back for lifer hearings in prison.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's such a heavy caseload. How long have you been doing that?
I have been in this assignment since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So quite a while.
Quite a while,
yeah.
Yes, actually. Jessica, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Thank you so much for setting this up. By the way, guys, it was Jessica's idea to have three people on the Sidebar Podcast. First time ever. This is a big deal for us, guys. Come on. And Jessica, tell us about what your role is within the Napa County District Attorney's Office.
Yeah, of course. So I am the forensic interviewer for the Napa DA's office.
Mm-hmm.
And my job basically is I'm responsible for interviewing children and adolescents ages 2 through 17, as well as vulnerable adults who are victims of or eyewitnesses to abuse or any type of violence.
Wow. Yes. And you have been with the DA's office now for about a year now, right?
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be a year in June.
So Jessica was our very first forensic interviewer, and she is over at the Courage Center, which we will be talking about here on this podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
Joe Perry and I, guys, started around the same time. You've been here about a year now, too.
Just shy of a year, yes.
Yeah, tell us what your role is for the Napa County District Attorney's Office.
So I'm a DA investigator, which is a police officer that works within the DA's office.
Mm-hmm.
We do follow-up investigation or help out on the initial investigation with the agencies within Napa County.
Excellent. So Joe is one of our investigators, and he is instrumental in gathering all the evidence that Kristen needs to prosecute these cases, as well as Jessica too with her interviews. So thank you guys very much for being here. So today I kind of want to dive into the Courage Center over at the Monarch Justice Center. I wanted to ask you guys, why is a Child Advocacy Center so important to the Napa County District Attorney's Office?
Yeah, the Courage Center is Napa County's Child Advocacy Center, and it's basically a safe and child-friendly place where law enforcement, child protection services, victim advocacy, medical and mental health professionals gather to help investigate child abuse cases, to help children heal from abuse, and hold offenders accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's a multidisciplinary effort. It's a collaborative effort, if you will, over at the Courage Center. And the Courage Center, correct me if I'm wrong, is within the Monarch Justice Center. Is that correct?
Yes, it is located inside the Monarch Justice Center.
Yeah, and I remember taking a tour of the Courage Center when I first got here. And, it is as you describe it. It's a warm and welcoming place. One of the things that I noticed right away from the Courage Center is that, it creates an atmosphere where somebody feels safe to share their stories with just such an important part of what you guys do. Because without it, I mean, we can't prosecute these sexual assault cases. Yeah. So, what would someone do? What do you do if, a normal person suspects that their child is being abused, or maybe they know of a child that is showing signs of abuse? Like, what are some of the signs that a child is abused? And this could be for any of you three.
I mean, I think that's a hard thing to answer. Each kid is going to react different. Mm-hmm. No one child is going to react the same way as the other. They're not all going to show the same symptoms. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, have these preconceived notions that a child will report right away, or they won't go back to their abuser. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times it's a loved one. It's somebody that they're comfortable with, somebody that they trust. Mm-hmm. And so they don't, shy away from that person. So really it's just having that relationship with your children, or with an adolescent, that they feel comfortable enough to talk to you, and just making sure that you're always there. Mm-hmm. To listen to them and to really listen to what they're saying. I don't want to hug this person. I don't want to go over this person's house, right? Instead of forcing our children, no, you have to go give grandpa a hug because that's what you have to do. You have to respect them. Respect your children's boundaries, because they may be telling you something.
And we were talking earlier, guys, about the documentaries that we saw on Max. One had to do with Jared Fogle, the subway guy. And the other one had to do with Nickelodeon, and that one is called Quiet on the Set. And, one of the things that I kept, noticing about these documentaries is the whole grooming process that takes place when, a child predator sets their sights on a child. They make them feel important, and they shower them with attention, and, things like that. So me as a parent, because I have 2 daughters as well, I'm always wary of like people who are too nice to my kids. It's like, why is this person being nice to my child? Not that this has ever happened, but this is the mentality that I have as a parent. Not only just because of my years as a news reporter, but just being not trusting of strangers around my parents. So I guess, what are some tips that, a parent could follow if they, if somebody comes around and shows more interest in their child than is normal?
So, we've seen it on some cases, especially recently through the DA's office, with some cases being prosecuted. Mm-hmm. And I think if your child is set up to be with an adult, or maybe a child that is significantly older than your child, and is spending a lot of maybe one-on-one time, maybe not saying it's necessarily always a bad thing, right? But maybe think about, why is this happening, right?
Right.
What type of situation am I leaving my child in when they're with someone else on that one-on-one time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So back to the Courage Center. What are some of the services offered over there?
So the Courage Center is mainly used for forensic interviews, since I'm stationed there right now. But we also, after the interview, we can provide mental health services. If they need, we refer out. We also offer teens counseling, and that would be through SAVE, since they do most of our victim advocacy there.
And SAVES is part of news, is that correct? Yes. SAVES is Sexual Assault Victim Services?
Yes,
Is that correct? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know them well, and they're one of our great partners over at the Monarch Justice Center. I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our advocates also help families get educated on what the prosecution process would be like, and refer them out if they need any legal help as well. So it's just a range of different services that we provide.
Why is it important to have these services under one roof, would you say?
I think it kind of gives that safe environment, that safe atmosphere, instead of having to have children or families go to multiple different buildings or drive to different places. Having everything there, it gives them that wraparound service. It gives them that feeling of safety, that feeling of confidence. We're also able to provide the medical evaluations at the Courage Center as well. We have a medical room. So if there needs to be an exam done, we could do that there rather than having to go to the hospital or an ER room. So it really just kind of gives them that sense of safety that they need.
Yeah, and one of the things that's one of the things that I first noticed about the Courage Center was when you walk into the examination room, it's like a tiny examination bed, and I just, oh my gosh, that is so sad. That is so sad that we have victims, very young victims come in, and we have this special table for them. And I noticed that right off the bat. But back to what you said about having one resource there for, so the victims can go and get services from a variety of different. It's almost like we're coming to them rather than they having to go out and seek these services, and that's a big deal, right? Telling your story once should be enough, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Very
telling
good.
it once and telling it to one person rather than multiple people. Imagine sitting in a room like this with 4 people around you having to say what happened to you. That's not easy.
Well, it re-traumatizes you.
Exactly.
Right? You have to relive the crime over again and answer the same questions. That's not helpful. So that's a good resource that we have here for the Napa County residents as well. What's the difference between just a regular interview like we're doing now and a forensic interview? Prior to coming to the DA's office, I had never heard of that. I didn't know what it is. Forensic interview, what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so a forensic interview is pretty much, we use research-based protocols and techniques to elicit information in a way that doesn't re-traumatize the child and can be legally defensible in court. So it's different than just doing a regular interview like how we are right now.
Right.
Yeah. So there's specific questions that we can't ask, some that we can ask. We use narrative practice, narrative prompts. Non-leading questions is obviously a good thing, but sometimes depending on how the child is, interviewing, then you have to, right? But it's best practice not to do that.
One of the things that scares me as a parent is my children having access to mobile devices. It's basically like having a little computer in your pocket that they can access basically whenever they want. There's no stopping where they go on these devices. So I think this is a question for Joe. How do you keep your kids safe online from these predators and abuse?
So that's actually a pretty good question, especially now we're in 2024. We're kind of coming out of the lockdowns the school had and everything.
Yeah.
And, prior to 2020, all these kids had the devices, but even more so during the lockdowns, kids had unvetted access and became their own little IT experts with
it became part of our culture,
right?
With Zoom interviews and Zoom by school, and you had to have a laptop
and some of these kids are smarter than we are with the devices, right?
Yeah.
So, part of this podcast is educating people. It's also helping the parents educate their children on what to do to properly keep themselves safe, keep themselves out of harm's way, and also prevention. So there's several avenues that parents can go about doing this. One is obviously like not leaving your child in a room or somewhere sequestered where you're not monitoring their activity. Depending on what cell phone service provider you have, you can have parental apps set up to monitor what your children are looking at. You can even set up the router within your house to block certain words. And
wow, I never knew that.
You can actually access your child's device through your device, especially if you have a Apple iOS device, and you can limit hours, limit contacts, limit content the child is able to access. And from prior to 2020, I had worked a lot of internet-based crimes involving children. That's where people online are seeking out children for specific vulnerabilities to get what they're looking for. And with people being locked down and all this technology, it's exploded in the last 4 years. And that's partially because everybody has a device in their hand, like you mentioned. So the Internet Crimes Against Children, they have a website that has parental tips, and I believe we're going to add that to this video.
Right, we're going to add that to the video, and we'll also include it in the description of the video so you guys can have access to that as well.
Correct. So that'd be helpful for parents to go on and watch. There's also videos they can show their children to maybe educate their children on, hey, everything you post online is available for anybody. Or some of these apps that you go onto, the security is set at a very minimal level, so that everybody on that app can access the child's content or can friend the child, and that is something as a parent that you need to make sure your child isn't being open to the whole world, which is what the internet is.
Oh, it's really just, every time I see a news story about, a teenager with a promising future, these athletes, and, they are victims of sextortion, which is another realm of crime that we see here in Napa County, which is where somebody tricks them, coerces them into providing, whether it's a nude photo or nude video, and then they get that information, they get that photo or video, and then the sextortion begins. And some teenagers have taken their own lives because of the situation. And I know that's like, it's one of these things. Every time I read it, I just think what a horrible thing for a parent and for a kid to go through.
Yeah, and if anybody within the house, but especially, I think this is the context of a child, if something happens, they need to report it to their parents. Everybody makes a mistake, it's okay, but you need to alert law enforcement, because someone that's doing that to your child is potentially doing that to thousands of children others across the world, right?
Yeah.
So you need to stop the abuse from continuing.
Yeah, and that's a good tip. I mean, there is always somebody out there, whether it's a parent or law enforcement, that will help you. And that's great. So
yeah, Kristen and I have had a few sextortion cases come in through the Courage Center recently, and I think for me personally, it's been a bit hard to do those type of cases just because there's so much involved in it, especially with social media. So just knowing what social media accounts they were using, who was contacting them from what social media account.
Yeah.
So just having maybe screenshots if something were to happen to your child or the child themselves, take screenshots of whatever social media they're using, and that would be helpful in case.
Or if they, sometimes if they have any unexpected money, or if they're spending money somehow, it's like, how did you get this? Like, what are you doing to get this? It's always something to consider. Who are your clients? Who are the victims of sexual assault, sexual abuse in Napa County?
Anyone. That's the thing.
Anyone.
It could
Men,
be anyone.
women.
Yeah. So, I mean, for the Courage Center, we're mainly focused on children 18 and younger, but it could be anybody.
And is it any particular, like, socio-demographic, rich, poor, black, white, just anybody?
Anybody can be a victim of sexual assault, of sextortion, and that's the part that I think needs to be kind of brought to the forefront of it, is that it can happen to anybody, and so we just need to be aware of that.
And that's exactly why we're doing this podcast, to raise awareness about this important topic. And it's we're always trying to find ways to protect children here at the Napa County District Attorney's Office, whether it's prosecuting people who would prey on children, investigating them, or doing interviews. And so, how can the community, in your opinion, make a difference in preventing child abuse?
So there's that old saying, like, it takes a village to raise a child, right?
Right.
And this is kind of the same thing, because your child is so involved in school and sports and home life and friends, and maybe the friend is the one that learns about the abuse, right? So the friend can go to their parents and tell them what's happening with the victim in this case, or a teacher or someone, right? Because there's always somebody out there the child is going to trust and tell the story to.
Right.
And then once that happens, alert law enforcement. And we've also seen cases where maybe a reporting party is initially told about some abuse, or maybe even witnesses some abuse, but kind of sits on it because they think, this isn't my lane to be in, and I shouldn't report this because it's not my family. That's the wrong attitude to take. It is your job, right?
Right.
It's your job to help protect somebody that's being victimized, and as I mentioned before, they might be victimizing other people, right? So you reporting it and at least making the initial contact with law enforcement is potentially going to help, several or dozens of kids along the way.
Yeah, and like Kristen was saying, like sometimes it'll take them years to report, right?
Yeah.
The abuse could happen when they're children, and they get up to their teens and their 20s, and then they're ready to report.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter if they're ready to report right when it happens or if they report decades later. Like, we are here to help when they're ready to talk. And I think just as a community, we just need to be aware of the children and just pay attention to what they're doing. If they're in school or your kids' friends and you just, they seem maybe down or sad, like ask them a question. Hey, what's going on? How are things going? And if they disclose something to you about abuse, or if they say, I don't want to go home today, and you ask them why, don't pry, don't ask them leading questions, but listen. Be there to listen to what they're saying, and then report it. Don't think I shouldn't be in this person's lane. It's not my business. It's not my family. We have to be there to protect our most vulnerable community, because sometimes they can't speak for themselves. So we need to be there to help.
Absolutely. You can't turn a blind eye to this type of crime. And, a lot of the times it happens within families. What do you do if your uncle that you love so much is doing inappropriate things with a child or another family member? And you love your uncle, but at the same time, they're doing these inappropriate things to the child. You have to have that courage almost to be able to say something and to come to us, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, is there, I'm sorry.
Nothing else.
Okay. Is there any other bit of information that you would like our audience to know about this topic or about the way that we handle these cases?
Yeah, I think just educating yourself on what the warning signs of child abuse are, and knowing the resources are in our community, right? So in case someone does come to you and wants to report, then you know where to go. Maybe someone doesn't come out and report to you, right, or disclose, then like, oh, okay, then these are the warning signs. I suspect something, and then you know what to do.
Yeah. A very serious topic today, and I want to thank our guests for being on the Sidebar Podcast. We got Joe and Kristen and Jessica. And thank you guys very much for being on the Sidebar Podcast. Remember to subscribe to the channel, as it makes our channel grow and we can do more of these and bring you this type of information. And that's going to be it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time on the Sidebar Podcast.